Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
Welcome everyone to the group chat brought to you by Overmark. I'm your host Darrell, and after a long hiatus, Emmanuel is finally back.
Hello guys, nice to be back. Hope you guys are doing fine. It's a very good day to discuss the upcoming O-levels in just about 3 months. Darrell, do you have any words of motivation for these fellas?
3 months, right? It sounds like very little time, but if you break it down, you have exactly 90 plus days. Even in fact, I think even lesser. If by the time you're listening, when the podcast is released, right, you have slightly lesser than 90, closer to 80 days. That is a very intimidating figure. I prefer to measure it by how many weekends I have left. And if you go and count backwards, there's not a lot of time. So what we're planning to do today in this episode is to give you a very quick breakdown in terms of what you should be expecting moving forward with your prelims probably just round the corner. After prelims, what you should be expecting, graduating, having a study break towards O-level. We want to let you know ahead of time so that you can plan your revision efficiently and effectively, such that by the time O-level comes around, you know exactly what you need to do. All right, so let's go into the timeline first. Maybe I'll throw this back to Emmanuel. Emmanuel, so in the next couple of months, what would be the key highlights or key milestones that they will need to hit?
Definitely set yourself up for practicing your O-level TYS papers, being very strict with yourself and the keywords that you have or do not have in answering those questions to get a fair gauge of your score. And always err on the side of caution. So for instance, if you're marking your own script at home, make sure to be extra strict with yourself to the point where if there's any ambiguity in your answer, just subtract the mark. No, honestly, just subtract the mark. You want to feel the pain of not meeting your expectations now so that you push yourself to work harder so that when you actually sit for the papers, you are poised for perfection. You leave no ambiguity for the examiners and you score the grade that you rightfully deserve. That's what I feel that you should be doing now. In the next couple of weeks, definitely, I think when you are listening to this podcast, the O-levels is not your immediate concern because you would probably be having 1 week away, 1 week to study for your prelims. So definitely now, like right now, you shouldn't be doing your TYS as your main form of practice because those usually are composed of the easier questions. So try to get a grasp of what are the common preliminary type questions, which definitely stand 1 to 2 levels above in terms of difficulty. So make full use of every single paper. You don't have that much time to practice left, so cherish that period that you can study. And while you're doing your papers, no phones, no music, no nothing. Make sure you're taking it seriously like an exam, so that when it comes to the real thing, when it's showtime, you know it's showtime. Okay, there shouldn't be any difference, and you should perform it the way that you've been practicing for. At the end of the day, it's all about how prepared you are. What do you think about that, Darrell?
Let me just share an analogy that I love. Right? So one of my favorite basketball players, Kobe Bryant, right? He has this special ability to in crunch time, which means when push comes to shove, it's just a one basket difference. He's always able to score that basket. So we call him a very clutch player. So when interviewers asked him, how is he always able to consistently hit those shots? He said, because I practice them, right? So I think adding on to what Emmanuel has said, the importance of not just doing papers, but doing it in an exam setting to put yourself through that rigor, that the concentration that you need to complete the paper with no mistakes. You have to put yourself through that process multiple times. So the more times you do it, the more prepared you'll be, right? So before you step into your prelims, right, you're gonna do prelim papers. But we all know, right, most of the time you're gonna do half of your MCQ. Then after recess, you come back to another half. Then you're using halfway, then you start using your phone. You kind of need to start focusing and eliminating all of these possibilities. Just narrow down and just do the paper with the time that you're actually allocated with. Because when the more you do that, eventually when you step into the exam hall, you'll just be doing another paper and you're doing it the same thing. Rather than suddenly you need to be very uncomfortable with the time limit, you're not too certain on how much time you can spend. So all of this can be eliminated if you do time practices. Now, I just want to touch on some of the points before we move on. So after your prelims, you're going to get your prelim results. there are two main things I want you to take away from your prelim results. Number one, prelim papers are usually more difficult. So if you don't do well for prelims, don't kill yourself over it or don't beat yourself over it, because strong likelihood, general trend is that you tend to do a bit better for O levels compared to prelim. So first thing is don't be discouraged. But the second thing is I want you to be able to set a more realistic goal after you get your prelim results. If you're getting a C6 at prelim, sorry to say, but getting an A1 at O level seems quite unlikely unless some sort of miracle happened. Which is possible if you really put in the effort, but I'm just saying it's quite difficult. So after you get your prelim results, you should have a more tangible goal, that more realistic goal that you can work towards. That is when you use the time after your prelims, closer to your graduation period or after the graduation during your study break. That's where you can tell yourself, okay, this is what I'm working towards, like from a C6 to a B3. Or if you're already at a B3, maybe you can aim for the A1. But don't set unrealistic goals and then you stress yourself out. We have to be real with ourselves and where we are currently at. Okay, so that's for the timeline. You don't have a lot of time. After prelim, O level is gonna come. Now, let's go into more of the details on how you can create a revision plan that will work for you, right? So with all plans, we have to start, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So start setting goals and realistic expectations. So what should go into your goals? You need to have an idea on how many hours you need to dedicate yourself to the revision. So I know not all of us can sit down and study for a long period of time. So maybe start off slower. Is it 4 hours, 6 hours? Eventually you work to the 12-hour mark. Do it in a way whereby you won't feel burnt out. Take breaks. Breaks are important. And make sure that at every point in time when you're revising, you're doing effective revision. So if you're not too sure what we're talking about, you can always refer back to one of our older episodes where we talk about how do you do practices effectively. Next, you need to start allocating your time and your resources. Okay, what do I mean by that? If you know that E-Math is one of your compulsory subjects that will be tabulated into your L1 R5 or L1 R4, and yet you're doing very poorly for it, this is when you need to start evaluating post-prelims to dedicate more time and more resources into these important subjects. We know that sometimes, you have a lot of subjects, right? It's not about putting equal effort into all of them, because some of them you're really good. For those, you want to spend time still, but it's just to maintain where you're at. We always fall into the trap of just doing more of the subjects that we're better at, because we're able to solve the questions. Then you feel good about yourself, right? Then it just keeps a repeating cycle, and then you keep pushing away subjects that you don't like, and you only focus on subjects that you like. But you need to take a step back and think about what's the goal for O level, right? The goal for O levels is to do well such that you can get into the course in poly that you want, or to get into the JC of your choice. So you need to know what goes into your L1 R5 or L1 R4 that will allow you to accomplish that goal. So even though you hate combined humanities, right? So much content, I don't want to study Stalin, right? But if you have to do it because it goes into your L1 R5, you have to dedicate those resources and time into those subjects. So don't just spend time on your favorite subjects. That's what I have to say about revision plan. Maybe I'll throw the time back to Emmanuel to share more on revision plan, perhaps.
Yeah, okay. So I feel that especially towards I mean I remember this the best when it was for my A levels, because that would be the time where I studied like the most. And I have very fond memories of that. One thing that really helped was having a routine. So making sure that you have a fixed steady flow, okay, toward your studies, and have a plan whereby you are able to commit to it like without any kind of interference. So for instance, like my day was very fixed. Every single day I knew what to do, what I needed to do as well. And I had little resistance towards it. So you don't want to have any form of inertia when you are going to study. So like if you don't have a routine dialed in, like go and settle that first, because the grades are really in the routine. The amount of effort that you can put in and the amount of work that you can accomplish when you develop a routine is far beyond your usual studying habits. So it's far beyond like creating like a last minute plan and like trying to churn out a very hardcore study session like last minute. You don't want that. Like that's the worst thing that you can have. So like imagine like a student like spending a very rigorous weekend studying like 12 hours for both days, versus one studious person who has a routine dialed in where he studies maybe like 6-7 hours a day and he plays, he rests, he gets enough sleep for the rest of the day consistently for like say 3 to 4 weeks, right, before the O levels. We already know who's going to do better. It's definitely the person who has a consistent routine. So I think my point here is aim for consistency. There's really like no point coming up with a rigorous last minute schedule. It doesn't work. And when you are 3 months out, you have the time to balance your studying habits. You have the time to create a routine that allows you to be effective, allows you to be consistent. Make use of that. Take advantage of that. The worst thing to see is students putting in effort at the last minute, thinking that the higher intensity sessions they have, the better they'll perform. Not true, definitely not true. Last minute work never quite gets you there. So if you had to take one thing away from my advice today, I'd say dial in the routine. So have something which you do not divert from. Have something where it's so consistent you don't even have to think about it. It's dialed into your body, it's dialed into everything. Like the moment you wake up, you know what you need to do. I would say that is the most surefire way for success, especially in terms of academic rigor. That's what helped me do well for my exams. And I think that like if you're able to commit to something like that, you should do well as well. Yeah, that's my take on this. Any other pointers, Darrell?
I think this nicely bridges us to our next point on how do you avoid burnouts, right? So I think Emmanuel's point here is you build a routine, you be consistent. That helps to avoid burnout. And I think we both are on the same wavelength that doing last minute, burning midnight oil, like chonging 1 to 2 weeks before your exams, the impact is limited and sometimes it destroys you before you even go for the exam. You know what I mean? Like, if the few days before you just burn yourself out thinking, okay, I just cram everything into my head, right? We don't tend to produce good results from that. So I think avoiding burnout is something that's very real, and mental health is something that you cannot really put a tangible value on it. But stress, right? Think of it as bar, right? If you put on too much weight, you put on weight sometimes it's good because stress spur you with motivation to do something, right? Because you're stressed that, oh, what if I don't do well for O level? It keeps you motivated. So a certain amount of stress is good. But if you have too much stress, it will break you apart. And that's the point where stress becomes a very negative thing that keeps you down, that hole that you cannot seem to get yourself up from. So managing the right amount of stress is a skill. And I think it's something so important, not just right now when you're studying, but in the future when you grow up, learning how to manage your stress in a very proper way would really go a long, long way. And trust me, when we say that, it's even worse at A levels, it's even worse at university. So learning to manage stress is a life skill. So what else can you do to avoid burning out? I say for those that have been exercising, you do sports, right? So for our athletes out there, continue to spend time to keep your body moving, to be healthy. Don't binge on snacks when you study and stuff, because keeping your body healthy is just one step of making sure that you're always in a good state. So for myself, I used to be in a very bad cycle where I don't take care of my body. I sleep very little. I spend too much time outside. I don't eat well. I keep falling sick. And that has a very negative impact because I can't pay attention in school. I keep falling sick. I can't study. Even if I study, I'm not absorbing. And then because I fall sick, right, then I push myself even harder. Then I fall sick even more. So getting ample rest, eating well, and also giving yourself time to unwind. These are all things that are so underrated. And these are kind of things that you start to push away just because you feel the urgency of O levels coming. Then you're like, it's okay, I just need to think through this period. Now, I give you a simple idea here. We are dealing with two words, urgent and important. Urgency is a matter of time, right? The O level is coming, it's very urgent. I have to accomplish this, right? But you need to recognize that between urgent and important, you need to find a balance, because something that's important is like staying healthy, being stress-free, not stress-free, but reducing your stress, maintaining a good state of mind. These are important things. But sometimes when the urgency comes in, the urgent stuff starts to take precede over what's important, you start to lose sight of what's important. And that would bring you to a bad place whereby now you're just focusing on marking 14 hours a day and you're neglecting your health. And you need to know that the important stuff is your foundation. if you neglect those stuff, the whole building will collapse, right? So you don't want your body to collapse. You don't want to fall into some situation where you're like mildly depressed or too stressed out to study, or just in general, that feeling of burnt out. So what I'm trying to drive at here is avoiding burnout is a skill, managing your stress is a skill, and we cannot emphasize enough how important. So while this episode is about building your revision plan 3 months before O level, we shared how you can do so. But I think something that we really want to emphasize on is this is the period where people start to get burnt out. If you find yourself in that loop, this endless loop of burning yourself out more and more, you need to take a step back, okay? While it seems urgent at the moment, you still need to give yourself to deal with what's important. Okay, so I hope I made that point clear. Maintaining your state of mind is more important than anything else. Okay, Emmanuel, do you have anything to add on to that point?
I think one last thing I'd like to add on is trying to have as many positive environmental cues as possible. So what I mean by that actually is to have some kind of environmental like artifacts. So anything like it can be anything around your room, can be anything around your house that kind of reminds you that you have to go about a particular activity. So this is especially true for students who are doing somewhat well. Okay, so what I mean by this is if you are scoring a A2 for your current grades, and you're feeling a bit relieved, or you're feeling like in that sense of like loud confidence, please okay, try to find a way to remind yourself that you are not that satisfied with that grade. Okay, or maybe if let's say you're getting a B3 and you're passing physics for the first time in your life, or you're passing a subject for the first time in your life, you're extremely happy. Please always remind yourself that there is room for improvement, right? And the way I did it was I would write. Okay, I told this to some of my students also. They found it very funny. But they actually tried it, and my current students now, I think they are having a lot of positive effects from this. So I told them that they should write a score on their palms. So a score of what they would not like to have. So I believe like some of them wrote very funny, ridiculous A-level scores. Okay, but make sure that it's realistic also. So for instance, like A-levels out of 90 points, right? So they wrote something like 70 flat. So they'd be very upset with a 70 rank point. As in, okay, to each its own, right? But so 70 to them wouldn't be a good grade. So I want them to write something that is reasonable and something that they are afraid of getting. So something that it could be possible if you do extremely badly that day. And this is a grade that you would be getting, right? So I wanted them to write a grade like that, a nightmare grade there. So that every single time you catch yourself scrolling through Instagram when you're supposed to be studying, or you catch yourself slacking off while you're supposed to be studying, then you wake up. You wake up and you realize, oh crap, I'm not done studying. I'm not done with my work. I'm not done with this. I'm not done with that. And you eventually let the environment sort of complement your style, sort of push you in the right direction. Correct? Because the last thing you want, right, is to have an environment that distracts you from your goals. If you have an environment whereby it's not conducive for studying, and that doesn't mean a loud and noisy environment only, right? It could mean things like having Instagram notifications, or like having YouTube recommendations pop up on your notifications while you are studying, right? Then you need to get rid of those, because those are the biggest time wasters, and time is so scarce at this period of time. So you have to find a visual cue, right? An environmental cue for you to step out of that frame and return to the task at hand. And then once the O-levels are over, right? Yeah, like just get it out of your system, go and play. For now, buckle down, get your act together, and just do your best in terms of studying.
Yeah, I think this nicely segues into our favorite portion of the podcast, at least my favorite portion of the podcast, which is the dilemma of the week. So the question for this week is it too late to start now? Right. So, I mean, we might all have this question in our head. It's 3 months to O level. If I start now, is it too late? Okay. My answer to that is that it's never too late to start. Right. So, I mean, we all have to start somewhere. If you have been slacking off for the past year, you have all sorts of excuses, whatever excuses you want to come up with, or even legit reasons for that. I think put that aside. The past is the past. Don't nobody drives looking in the rear view mirror, right? What is ahead is the next 3 months and how you can make the best out of it. So For me, I think how I'll approach it is think about what can you do now that would make sure you have no regrets in the future. So for myself, like in anything in life, I always decide or I work hard based on this single frame of mind, like how I think about things. I just want to make sure when in the future, when I look back, I don't want to regret, right? And the thing about O level is it's not the end all and be all. It's not like you screw up your O level, your life is screwed. No, that's not true. Whoever telling you that is lying to you. O level is just a step in the way of many things, right? For example, if your goal for O level is to go into the course that you want to, that is the purpose of O level. It's not about the grade that defines you. Your grade does not define you. However, what I would like you to think about is when you do something, give it your best. Make sure you have no regrets. You're only going to take your O level once. You might as well do it once, but do it well. Just give it your best. Such that a point when you look back in the future, you have like absolutely no regrets. Like Emmanuel said, for example, if your goal is to enter a certain JC, you don't want to be always thinking, oh, what only if I studied harder during those 3 months, then I will score 1 point better and I'll be able to go into that JC of my choice. Then my life might have been different, blah, blah, blah. You don't want to be entertaining those thoughts. You want to be able to confidently tell yourself that I have no regrets. Given the situation that I was in, I did my best and this was what panned out and I'm happy where I am. I think that is the best state of mind you can have. But this is only achievable if you give it your best. If you slack off and you give up, you're like, I don't care, like whatever, let it be, right? Then you don't get what you want. Then who can you blame? You cannot blame anybody else but yourself, right? Because you were given an opportunity to make something work and for you to work towards your goal. So there are there's 2 lines. One is you work towards it and you don't make it, but that is fine because you tried. The second one is you didn't even try. If you didn't even try, you got nobody else to blame but yourself. If you fall under the first line, which is you tried but you didn't make it, in fact, I commend you for your effort. I really want to pat you on the back telling you that you did a great job. But the truth is, you tried your best. That's all that matters, right? That's life. Sometimes life don't work out. But what matters is that you try. So is it too late to start now? Definitely not the case. But if you start now, you need to acknowledge that time is no longer on your side. So there are certain things you need to do differently, some things that you need to do deliberately, because now you're no longer just running, you're trying to catch up. Think of this as a marathon. People are already a few laps ahead of you. You need to now start overtaking, catching up to them even, right? If you're thinking of getting like a good grade that you dream of, then there's a lot of work that has to be done. But this is not like, okay, wow, after I hear this podcast, I'm motivated, let's go, 16 hours tomorrow. No, you will die, right? You can do that for 3 days, but trust me, you'll be out for the next 3 weeks. So do it in a way that's sustainable, do it in a way that's consistent, but do so with the determination. So the next 3 months is a make or break. I know it's easy to say, but surround yourself with friends that are of similar mindset, that we go for it together, we study together, we keep ourselves in check. Right? On the weekend, even if you're studying at home, text each other in the group chat, make sure you're awake, doing practices together, check with one another if you have questions. There's a lot that could be done with a good support group. It makes all the difference. So 3 months is not a lot of time, but it's definitely sufficient time to make significant improvement. All right. So I hope that is clear. Emmanuel, what we have to say and shout out to the students then?
I would think that the best piece of advice would be, it's never too late to start. Okay, actually no lah. I think that's what you said also. So I'll end off with another quote here. It goes something like, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. So this only applies to people who haven't actually started. So if you haven't already started, right, you have to start if you want to achieve something. And as Darrell has mentioned, time is scarce, right? But if you're listening to the podcast when it's just come out, definitely there's still enough time. That doesn't mean you go and dilly-dally, take your time and slowly try to digest content. No, you should already be putting in the hours, putting in the effort. But I am on the opinion that O levels isn't too rigorous, meaning to say that if you really hunker down and put in the effort for the next couple of months, I think that's actually quite a lot of time, honestly, right? If your foundation is not 0, then 2-3 months make a lot of difference. And like your foundation is not 0 if you've been paying attention in school, right? If you've been paying attention in school, then I'd say you're at least passing, right? Okay, or maybe very close to passing, right? If you're borderline fail, definitely there's hope for you, right? But if let's say you haven't been listening in class and you've just been wasting your entire schooling years in Sec 3, Sec 4, then definitely it's a bit harder. You need to manage your expectations. But end of the day, 3 months is a lot of time for a person with a lot of determination. So it's up to you to step into the roles of that person if you want to achieve something. And for the rest of you who've been consistent with your work, 3 months is a lot of time for you to master your craft. Okay, so really go and take your time to master your craft. Do the best that you can. And I really like what Darrell mentioned. So he said something like, the end state is not necessarily getting straight A's, not necessarily getting whatever you the maximum possible grades for every problem, right? At the end of the day, I think the person who really wins in every sense of the word wins will be the person who has done outstandingly well for himself, which means maximizing whatever he could, because that would be stoic. Okay, I subscribe a lot to this lah, but the idea is you shouldn't take that joy from the external influences in your life. Meaning to say, it's not the best thing in the world if you score A1s for everything, or it's not the worst thing in the world if you fail for everything. Like, you shouldn't measure it based on the external things that happen in life, but more so the actions that you have taken, right? Because you can't control the things that happen in your life, but you can control how you react to them. So if you have been studying like very, very truthfully and very diligently, then you should take pride in that, and you should rest you should rest easy knowing that you've done your best. And I feel like that's the end state. So try to derive that level of fulfillment and that level of inner peace, so that whatever happens, right, you have no regrets. Whatever happens, you're giving it your all, and you can go to sleep soundly knowing that you have maximized your potential. I feel like that is the most important. And sometimes we don't get there on certain days, but try your best to get there every day, so that when you fall asleep on your bed, you're like, okay, yeah, I made perfect use of today. I think that's a very wholesome day. And yeah, thank you guys for tuning into this week's podcast. Darrell, you have any last few concluding words?
I just wanted to share something for myself that worked. One way I worked around being too stressed out is by not having any expectations. But the only expectation I have of myself is to give my best. So if I walk into the exam hall, it's not that, oh, I'm aiming for A, B, or C. I just go in with the expectation that I'll just give it my best. So that doesn't only apply to academics, it applies to life. Doesn't matter what you do, as long as you give your best, have no regrets, and don't be ashamed or regretful about it. There's nothing to feel like, oh, I disappointed who expectations. Get rid of expectations. Is really the killer of all joy. If you just go in the mentality that you give your best, you'll be all right. Okay, so I think with that, we've come to the end of today's podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, remember to give us a like and even leave us a comment in the comment section to let us know what you'd like us to discuss next. If you're listening to us on Spotify and you have any topics that you want us to discuss next, feel free to always, we always have those IG stories, just tell us what you want us to discuss and we'll be more than happy to do so. All right, and with that, we'll see you in the next episode of the group chat. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
It sound right, boy.